All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another exciting edition of Two Men in Black and White, an honest conversation. I'm joined by my partner in crime, Brock Ganellis, out in beautiful, sunny Santa Fe. And I'm located today on the road again in Valdosta, Georgia, about 30 miles from the Florida state line. All right, Brock, um, we have reached uh, demented proportions here when it comes to the El Presidente posting a picture of himself in the Pope's regalia. Like, what are we doing? Like, how are we allowing this? And at what point do we say 25th Amendment? What are we doing? What are we doing? Help me understand. Help me
I
help
mean,
you.
this is to me, it's kind of to me, it's an indictment of religion in America, right? How really like religion, especially white evangelical Christianity, right,
Oh my
has
gosh.
just been, it's just become. It's a white supremacist. They're the underpinnings of the white supremacist movement. Like
Right.
the Bible, the teachings, right? They're all just co-opted for whatever plays into the power structure that they need for America because they know it's such bullshit. Like both sides are bullshitting each other. They
Right.
Trump doesn't care about religion. They know Trump doesn't care about religion. They don't really care about it either. They're
Right.
trying to talk to the masses because, quote, the good book gives them something to stand on, but none of them care
Right.
about any of it. And it's an embarrassment to the world again. And like true Catholics who care about the Pope, they're
Right.
looking at that shit as a fucking joke.
Right, right. And the funny thing is too, I saw a meme the other day that said, stop pretending, that Jesus would have been a member of MAGA, because Jesus, would have fed the kids, right?
Yeah.
Because we're talking about, cutting all these programs, the reduced lunch program, the summer school lunches. Um, and it really is ridiculous when you stop and think about it at its heart, because like you said, these are the people who basically, flouted their religion and disguised it, and used the religion to disguise their white supremacy, which is all we're seeing here.
Yeah, and it's economics. Like they're kind of
Right.
part of the oligarchy, right? You get
Right.
Joel Osteen and some of these
Ooh.
televangelists. Like they're printing money also. So like it's a wealth game for them as well.
Right.
Um, that element is just a joke. I don't why people take it. I know why people take it seriously. They take it seriously because it plays into the world they want to see anyway, so
Right.
they will hybridize, bastardize anything in
Right.
order to get, like I was saying yesterday, the first thing I think of now is how does this play into the white supremacy agenda? Photo
Right.
of Trump as the Pope plays into that agenda as just doubling down on the base of support in the evangelical community where Trump is like, godlike and just, they're just playing a game.
Right. It's all a sick joke. But when does America wake up? Do you think these tariffs are going to do it? Because now, you can't even, get through YouTube without seeing tariff, 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 right, in your feed about all these stories about how the tariffs are getting ready, to take over, Americans' lives and cause Americans to have to make some real tough choices.
I think tariffs are going to get to young people. Maybe I'm wishful thinking, but I think so because they don't have as much discretionary income, right? They're
Right.
all struggling, right? That's
Right.
part of the disaffection of youth, right? They're having trouble finding jobs. AI is replacing jobs. Now their student loan debt is coming back. They can't afford houses. They can't afford the rent, right? So they live off that fast fashion and the cheap goods of like is Temu, am I pronouncing it
Emu.
correctly?
Emu,
Right. But
yeah.
they're because they need bargains
Right.
because they still want to be trendy and cool, but like they don't have the money to do it. So they're gonna feel the sting of it. I think more than, older people, aren't gonna, yeah, I don't know, you're just not buying as much stuff,
Yeah.
right? You've got
Yeah.
enough, when you get older, you have enough stuff. You're not worried
Right.
about whether you have anything that's trendy or cool, or you're not going out as much, right? You're just not worried about it. Fashion doesn't mean as much to you. Look at me, right?
Right. Look at me.
Yeah, right. We're
I'm
prime
dressed up
examples
today
like that.
with a
So
polo
I think
on,
it's going to
you
really,
know?
really bother.
But it
It's going
makes
to.
perfect
It's going
sense.
to
And,
bother young
I've
people.
got another, kind of twist to this because those same young people who, all the studies and the polls are saying are more unhappy than young people have been in the past. But remember, parents are parenting longer. These kids are going back home, right? You talked about them not being able to afford houses. These kids are living with their parents and they're
Yep.
miserable, right?
Yeah, they're
Because
making their parents miserable too. Everyone's miserable.
exactly.
Of course, everyone's miserable. No one wanted to come home after, no one wants to be back with their parents, right? You just want to live your own life.
Right.
Yeah.
And you thought you were going to be able to, which is the
Yep.
dream that you were sold,
You
when
know,
you went to Harvard,
you know,
when you
yeah,
went to Yale.
this comment reminds me of a story I saw this morning where it's like the Democratic Party is divided. And it showed a picture of James Carville, who's like saying, "Oh, we got to sit back and let Trump make his mistakes." And how Carville still has such a voice is
Oh, it's
amazing to me.
incredible.
And David Hogg on the other side, because they're like butting heads, because Hogg wants to primary all the older, lazy,
Right. Do
unenergetic,
nothings. Right.
do nothings in the party. And I'm like, I mean, where else in society does like the 25-year-old not be taking center stage away from the 80-year-old? Like,
Right.
to me, that's not a divide. That's just like an old guy hanging on for dear life, like so many politicians do when it's
Right.
time to exit stage left. And no one really cares about the success you had in the 1980s with Bill Clinton, or
Right.
like, come on, you had your day, enjoy, sip your wine, but like,
Right.
be a spectator. You're not a leading voice in the party. David Hogg's trying to shake shit up with a young person's perspective.
Right.
Obviously, that's the direction the party should go. That's where the messaging should be.
Right. And it was funny. I was watching a debate on one of those silly shows, and it just happened to suck me in because of the car ride that I was on, that 4.5 hour, jaunt from Atlanta to Valdosta. And, they were talking about a similar perception of the party, but the division was like, who is the voice of the party? Is it Tim Walz? Because Tim Walz had, some critiques of the
Mm-hmm.
campaign. He could code speak to white guys fixing their truck in the country
Yep.
areas, in rural areas, right? And that's why he was on the ticket. So, but where does the ticket go now? I still appreciate Kamala. We talked about this last night. I still
Yeah.
appreciate Tim Walz. I don't care who he code speaks to, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We need a common sense campaign with common sense leaders who
Yeah,
can.
is it Pritzker's message?
Yeah,
Is it Pritzker's message? It's going to be, there is no one leader right now, and it's a conglomeration, and we're going to see how the message coalesces. I saw a great interview with Wes Moore yesterday, and he was literally out talking about, first, don't whitewash history, but second of all, it's a shared history, and he was embracing the multicultural America, and he was
finally.
embracing and immigration. He was talking to pro immigration, like we all came here from somewhere and
Yeah,
made it into this great, I think he called it a mosaic. And that's
right.
something we've always been proud of here in America. And that's what, is like American values.
Yeah.
I forget which, he was on with Dana Bash.
Okay.
So I think it's starting to I think it's the message and the protests and everything are sort of circling each other, but the circles are starting to conjoin a
Overlap.
little bit.
Yeah.
And to be honest, in 2025, Mark, I don't think the opposition needs one leader. It's almost
Right.
too early for that. I
Right.
mean, AOC was out talking shit on Tom Homan at her town hall today, saying, "I'm not afraid of you," because Homan's
Right.
saying he's gonna like what, come get her, arrest her
Start
for free
locking people up.
speech.
Yeah.
He's like, "Come and get me."
Right.
And you know me, I I I hope they make that mistake. They lock up AOC and there'll be a million people on the streets. Like, they make
Easy.
a mistake like that. Yeah, you can go lock up some random judge in Wisconsin. It was just a ripple, right? Some
Right.
people got mad, but it didn't create a revolution. You lock
Right.
up AOC, I mean, you might as well just announce civil war.
Right, because what she's been able to do on the road with her crowds and with Bernie's backing and Bernie's support is, coalesce those two crowds, right? The Bernie
Yeah.
Bros have now coalesced with the AOC lovers. And I really do believe it's a common sense movement against the oligarchs. Now, if we can just get everybody kind of on that same page, weave in Westmore's mosaic, who is an amazing leader in his own right. And remember the work that Les did before he ran for governor. He was working at Robin Hood and running
Oh,
as
that's
this
right.
Robin
That's
Hood in
right.
New York City, right? So he understands the wealth gap and he understands how wide that
Yeah.
chasm is.
I'd forgotten that was his background. But the good thing is that the AOC Bernie message is becoming more of the mainstream message. It's
Yes,
not considered so out of bounds to say Medicare for all now. It's not
right,
so out of bounds to say certain, because now that Medicaid is being taken away or being risked of taken away, everyone's kind of like, whoa, our
right,
healthcare system does suck. And,
right,
Louise Mangini shooting the guy from United Health sort of brought that to the fore as well of how much
right.
everyone hates their healthcare. And
Yep,
they know it's a business of people saying no, like they're in the
right.
business of denying. So that's a good outgrowth out of what's going on, but it's still, it's still happening too slowly, right?
Right,
We still
right.
need to pick up the pace, but it is kind of coming together a little bit. But James Carswell's got to step aside. It's like, come on,
Yeah,
you
dude,
know,
let it go. You
the
had your run.
25-year-old guy is the future. The 80-year-old
Yeah,
year old guy, you can be wise sage on the hill giving advice, but like you're
right.
not setting the tone and the message for the party. I
Not at
am
all.
sorry. You're just
Yeah,
not.
we don't need any more tersely worded letters. I mean, we've had enough of those. Mr.
Yeah,
Schumer,
humor.
put your pen down. I want to talk a little bit about this immigration too, because I know immigration is a loser for Trump, right? And the fact that the immigration policy is basically turned into kidnapping and then warehousing people for profit. I mean, El Salvador is collecting per head, right, on the people that are being sent down there. They're like, we are
Mark,
paying
can I
for
want to
those people.
interrupt and I want to contradict you for a second.
Yeah,
I don't think Trump thinks immigration's a loser for him. Not
that is
not if you're gonna look
crazy.
at his rally in Michigan and the shit that he's saying. I think you think it's a loser for him. I think it appears like it's a loser for him for everything I'm seeing in the polling,
Right.
but I don't think between what Stephen Miller being out there and
Yep.
Homan being out there and Christy Nome still saying inane shit, I don't think Trump thinks it's a loser for him.
Well,
Now
you
I'll
know
let you
what?
go
I'd have
back
to
to
agree.
making your point, but I want to just throw that out there.
I would have to agree because they're still full steam ahead with it, right? They're still in court, still defying, court orders and, still moving ahead with kidnapping and disappearing people off of American streets. But the worst thing for it to me, as you know, it affects me very closely because I have a son that's incarcerated, is the profiting off of warehousing human beings, right, is just sick to me. If you haven't seen Ava DuVernay's brilliant documentary on the prison industrial complex, please check it out because it helps you understand like exactly what they do and how ingrained it is in the fabric of America. In the fabric of America, excuse me. So during the course of that documentary, they run a list of American corporations down that are benefiting from prison labor. You recognize just about every name on that list, right? And so when you start thinking about, the sentencing structure and the way, black and brown people are always sentenced to higher sentences and longer sentences than their white counterparts. You look at the areas that are over policed. You look at the types of crimes that typically cause for longer sentencing, right? And where those are typically located in the urban areas, just like the disparity in powder cocaine and crack cocaine, right? Powder rampant out in the suburbs. You look at the crack epidemic. We tried to arrest our way out of the crack epidemic. You look at the opioid epidemic, it became a health crisis nationally, right? Because it hit the suburbs extremely hard and still is to this day, right? But we're not seeing large numbers of white Americans with addiction going to prison as we
No, rehab. Go
crack
to
cocaine.
rehab.
Yeah, they get rehab, right? They get another chance, a second chance.
Yep.
So let me just give you the math. Okay. So this one visit, right? We've got what, two tanks of gas? That's 80 to $100. We've got three people along for the ride. So that's three meals times three people. Let's say 150 to $200. We then go inside the facility to visit him. We spend about $30 in quarters, right? On a couple of sodas, a couple of bags of chips, a sandwich, and 2 hours we spend another $30, right? A hotel room. It's graduation season down here in Valdosta, so the college, the hotel industry
Yeah.
bumped up the prices, so we're at like two and a quarter, before tax. We're at $500 already for 24 hours. We left this morning at 8 o'clock, right? We'll be back tomorrow, you know, by late afternoon. So, what if you don't have a family that has the ability to do that for you, right? Now you are cut off from your support system. You are cut off from the smile that we saw on my kid's face today, on my mom's face, right? And the one thing he said to us that resonated with me today, that really got me thinking about this was he was like, Dad, I am so glad you guys came. I really needed this today. And we're just talking about 2 hours sitting around, sharing snacks and catching him up on what's going on out here in the world. Now we send books, we send magazines, we send money every week for food so he can, at least try to get something somewhat nutritious, because we all know what kind of meals are provided in these kinds of settings. But there is a shit ton of money being made off of this industry, off the backs of human beings. And until we start caring about each other as human beings, we're never gonna change this system. And the last point, and then I'll let you go. We had about 6 families in the waiting area before we went in, all black, all black, right? And so by the time, and it just is what it is, right? And the frustration for me is that my grandson is almost normalizing this, right? He's on his headphones, he's got his phone, he's like, let's go to prison, see my dad. And that's the hard part for me, because I didn't grow up like that. So I have no idea what to say to him to
Yeah.
motivate him not to want to repeat this pattern. And that's what the government bets on. Did you know that the government checks third grade reading scores to project the number of prison beds they'll need by age 18? Third grade reading scores. That's how far out they're projecting prison beds.
And
And
scores are going down, so I'm sure beds
yeah,
are going up.
right,
Um, you know, I mean, this the once again, maybe one positive outgrowth of Trump, once we get rid of him,
right,
is that we've gotten a civics and a societal lesson on like cruelty, right? And how
right,
much power our government can wield and how negative that power can be used. And maybe
right.
it'll open our eyes to some, things that have been were
It's a
normal
great point.
pre-Trump, right?
Right,
And maybe now these things can be discussed in a different way instead of always talking about justice system as how many people get thrown in jail, catching the bad guys, right?
right,
And the racism behind it. But it
right,
also gets to the bigger point of like, which I think we're going to have a national referendum and discussion on, which is what things should government be doing and which things should be privatized, right?
right,
Because as we privatize the justice and prison system, it gets incentivized the wrong way. It gets incentivized to
right,
throw more people in jail. So we have the
right,
highest incarceration rate in the world. Same with healthcare. It used to be like, once again, Bernie Sanders was a wacko for talking about Medicare for all. But now we realize that privatizing healthcare is giving us the worst outcomes for the most money in the world. So
right,
why shouldn't that be something that is, quote, socialized. So we need
Right.
to win back the word socialism, which loses elections and gets Latinos in Florida to vote for Rubio's and Trumps of the
And
world,
Trump's
and
right.
realize Social Security is socialism. It's got it in the name, and now everyone's worried about losing it.
Right.
Medicaid is socialized medicine. Oh, no one wants to lose their Medicaid because they're going to die earlier. Well, hey,
Right.
maybe everyone should be a part of this collective. Maybe it's not so bad for us all to be in the same boat together.
Right.
Toxic capitalism is
Right.
what's really all destroying America. And the
No doubt.
oligarchs are a piece of that puzzle. So maybe we're going to be able to have these discussions. Maybe we have to have them. Maybe they're
Right.
going on. Maybe they're going to happen in May with the budget discussion, because budgets is really when governments
That's where the
decide their
battle is.
values. How are you going to spend your money? Are we going to
That's where
feed
the battle
kids,
is.
or are we
Yep.
going to cut taxes on billionaires? Where are where are American values? But maybe I just think all these things can be on the table. And when the David Hoggs and the AOCs and the young people who are the progressives become the message, it's that
Right.
middle of the road, moderate white guy that, in my opinion, Elisa Slotkin and her bullshit speech she gave 2 weeks ago, that really have hurt, the messaging of the Democratic Party, because they're always dragging it to MAGA light. And
Right.
then and hopefully we're going to have this reckoning that in order to beat Trump, we're going to have to get more aggressive, and hopefully it's going to push us to the left, because I think further out to the left is where that unifying message is of
Yep.
white people with black and brown people. So this
Absolutely.
is the internal infighting the left is having amongst white people in order to get this, who's the leader and who's going to deliver the message, to get everyone together, to get everyone out there on June 14th, since Trump told us the day that he wants us all to come to DC and
Right.
fuck up his birthday party.
Yeah, let's do it. We got to do it. And I think you're right there, because, how many friends do you have from Canada that have never complained about their health or their health care, right? Have never not been able to see a doctor, right? Like I know I had a hockey friend and family. The dad was a dentist. He was not complaining at all, living a good life, making a good living, driving a really nice car, right? And affording travel hockey. So, it's not so bad if you figure it out the right way, if you take out the greed, right? And the greed and the waste and the fraud. That's what the Doji Bros were supposed to be doing, but they were doing it to enrich themselves, right? It's a totally different,
But you
you
know
know,
what? There's gonna be waste and fraud in anytime you get a collection of people together.
right,
It's not gonna be super efficient. There's always gonna be inefficiency. So name any collection of people, sports team,
right.
schools, governments. Let's stop pretending like anything
It ain't
runs
happening.
perfectly. It's just it's a part of life, because we're human beings and we get lazy and some get greedy, and so that's going to happen, and not let that be the boogeyman that thwarts progress. Another interesting point on this is the rest, like you just brought up Canada, the rest of the world has gotten this,
Yeah,
because Trump
yeah,
is the number one driver of, like in essence, liberal governments in the world, because Australia just voted down their entire quote conservative party just yesterday and
yeah,
threw out a whole bunch of their right wing.
yeah.
So now Canada's done it,
Eat
Mexico's
it.
done it, Australia's done it. We just don't have enough elections, I guess. We got to
Right,
wait 3.5 years, which is why we got to do it through protest. But the
right,
rest of the world's figured it. The rest of the world's figured this shit out.
right.
We just, our American exceptionalism got intertwined with capitalism and created negative outcomes for the masses. And our scorecard was always like stock markets and quote wealth of the few, not the
Right.
health of the many. And
Manny,
and
right.
maybe we can change that mindset only
Yeah.
if we get out there and protest together.
And that's what we've got to do. So let's keep pounding on that message. We like the leadership we see emerging, Hogg, AOC, Bernie's continued messaging, Kamala's back. I think we're headed in the right direction in terms of action. Now it's time for us to go ruin that military parade. I think we ought to plan to take a couple days off of work and hit that military parade. And all we got to do is gum up the works. All we got to do is get there on the
Yeah,
13th, right? And just park. That's all we got to do. Park and
yeah.
honk.
They're not going to march. They're not going to march right over people. Not, I
No.
mean, And if they do,
No.
there'll be a lot of cameras on it, and
Right.
maybe it'll rile up some more people. Look, I don't want to get trampled, but
Right.
I think there's a growing consensus that the the protest movement, and Pritzker had the right word, needs to get more disruptive. And
Right.
there's just because I'm a blue sky hawk, right? I'm on that thing all day scrolling. I'm just seeing more and more people just come to the conclusion that we're going to have to take more risk here. It's going to have to get amped up.
Yep.
There could be some negative outcomes, but just talking about what's wrong isn't going to fix what's
Isn't
wrong.
gonna cut it.
It's We're going to have to throw bodies at this, and we're going to have to push the issue. And yeah, it's going to get riskier, but
You're
like,
right.
saving democracy, is it worth the risk, or are we just going to roll around and do podcast and bitch about everything every day?
Right.
We're
Right.
still
You
going to
got to
do
do
that. We're
more
still
than
going to do that, but we got to do that plus.
no doubt. No doubt. All right, bro. That's the last word for today. We'll check in tomorrow and just keep an eye on this because it's every day with this guy. I got to wake up and look at my fucking
Every
news.
day. It'll be something new tomorrow. There'll be another
Yeah.
thing tomorrow.
Yeah.
We probably missed 10 things today that we didn't even talk about, but
Right. Right.
all right. Well, I mean, I'd say enjoy your time there, but I know it's like
It's
bittersweet
hard.
at best. Um,
It's
but
tough, bro.
drive home safe, and we'll catch
Will
up
do.
tomorrow.
All right. Sounds good,
All
brother.
right. All
Talk
right, man.
soon.
Bye bye.
Peace.